Hi, everybody. I am Stacy Seslowsky, functional nutrition dietitian, and I'm here with my friend and partner, Leah Barrick. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Barrick. Stacy and I met in our master's degree program at the University of Western States, where we got our degrees in human nutrition and functional medicine. And Stacy and I have been talking because we want to share the information that we've learned and really make an easily accessible, easily digestible way for our listeners and just our community to learn about functional nutrition and all of that. So we decided to make a podcast. So this is our first one, and we're super excited. And we just want to, make it easy to digest, easy to understand, and create actionable tips for you to take home and help you get healthy, stay motivated, all of that. So without further ado, we're going to get going. Our first podcast is all about inflammation. So this is a huge topic. We're going to try to cover it and in detail, but not too much detail, so it doesn't take hours and hours. But without further ado, I will go ahead and let Stacy get started.
Thanks, Leah. So inflammation, we hear so much about this topic, and I think there's a lot of confusion over, well, how do you even know if you are inflamed? And if you are, what should you do about it? And so I thought we'd start kind of from the basics, right? So the very classic signs of inflammation are redness, heat, pain, and swelling. Now, these are obvious signs when we endure an injury, or even sometimes when we are exposed to a germ, right? Then we might have a fever or something that it shows us one of those signs of inflammation. And that is really critical process that our body has to go through to heal the injury, the physical injury, or to engulf the germ and rid it from your body. So without inflammation, we would not be able to survive. It's really our defense and protection against all of the, outside invaders and pollutants and things that we are always exposed to. I think that the problem starts to arise when there's inappropriate inflammation, right? When the inflammation continues to linger on, when either your body's first inflammatory response was not powerful enough to completely rid your body of that toxin or germ, or to completely heal the injury, then sometimes inflammation will continue to linger on. So that's one issue with chronic inflammation, is that when you're not powerful enough to get rid of that first toxin or germ or injury. And then the other inappropriate inflammation, like I like to say, is when our bodies are reacting to something that we would normally think is not inflammatory. And this can be a type of food. Sometimes now that we unfortunately in the United States, we eat the standard American diet, and a lot of the foods that we eat are processed foods, which means that there are ingredients added to the food, or that the original ingredient was changed so much that our bodies no longer recognize those things as food. And although our minds think, oh, we're just eating this chip or this, food that came in a package and it's normal for us, our bodies may create an inflammatory response because those foods are not recognizable to the insides of our body. Does that all make sense?
Totally. And I think, when most people think of inflammation or they hear the buzzword inflammation, they think, oh, it's horrible, it's bad, we need to get rid of it. And that's not necessarily true. With most things in nutrition, there's a lot more nuance there. And so I think it's just important to distinguish, acute versus chronic inflammation. So acute inflammation, let's say you're riding your bike and you fall off and you hurt your elbow and it's red and puffy and inflamed. That's actually good. We want that. That's the healing process. Same thing when you come across a virus or a bacteria and your body increases its inflammatory response. It should be doing that because that helps us fight the toxin or the bacteria, the virus, whatever it is, and helps the body heal from that. versus chronic inflammation, which is this low grade ongoing thing, I like to compare it to like a fire, right? So if we have this huge fire, that's our acute response versus, if you put out the fire a little bit, but there's still some coals burning or there's still a little bit of a flame and it's just constant, that little bit of heat that's chronically going. And like you said, the standard American diet just perpetuates that. So it's ongoing. And when you have that chronic response, then your body's acute response doesn't work as well. So it's really important to be able to control the amount of inflammation, and not just say all inflammation is bad or have that ongoing chronic inflammation. You really want to nip that in the bud, because inflammation, chronic inflammation in particular, is the underlying cause of so many different diseases. So really addressing that is super important.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that it's helpful to decipher between, well, do I have this like injury that I endured that just is not healing? And so then you may have to promote and almost promote an inflammatory response to help your body get rid of that lingering injury or germ, as opposed to, well, am I having inflammation because I'm just eating an quote inflammatory diet? And in that way, we need to then change the diet and take, herbs and foods that are anti-inflammatory. So we have to decipher between times when we want to promote inflammation to really help your body get rid of something, as opposed to promoting anti-inflammation. And I think that's where it's helpful to really work with a practitioner who can analyze, well, what type of inflammation are you dealing with? And so that we know which food or herb will be best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And especially, you have to treat it as an individual thing. So for one person, a certain herb or nutrient or whatever could be super immune modulating, really help strengthen their immune system, versus someone else who might have an autoimmune disease or something, or an overactive immune system. If they took that same herb or that same supplement, that could be devastating for them, right? Because it could just amp up their immune system even more. So having a targeted approach is so important. And it's really hard when everyone hears, oh, this herb is anti-inflammatory, and then they try it and they have a horrible reaction. They may not understand why. So I think this is a really important topic for people to understand, that it totally depends on your unique situation. And there's different ways to get rid of that chronic inflammation in a way that will work for you.
Yes. Yeah. And I really want to get to exactly which foods and herbs that we're talking about. But exactly like you said, when you hear so much information about all the foods that are, quote, anti-inflammatory, and yet if you're that person that has that lingering injury or lingering infection that is not healing, and then you go and load up on those anti-inflammatories, you could be worsening the problem, because you're not going to allow your own natural immune system to fend off whatever that, germ or injury was. And instead, you're going to tell your body to be anti-inflammatory and not allow inflammation to go through the healthy, natural way. So yeah, I think that it's really important to decipher between what your own individual situation is.
Totally. Yeah, that was really well said. And, I do think, with that being said, with the individual approach, there are certain things that work for just about everyone. I like to call them the low-hanging fruits, the easy things that pretty much work for most people. There's going to be more nuance depending on the individual, but I like to talk about just more general tenets. So, if you want, Stacy, I can go ahead and jump right into that. So basically, we really want to focus on an anti-inflammatory diet. So there is so much you can do with diet and lifestyle. I'm going to talk about diet a little bit first, and then we'll address some lifestyle things as well. But first and foremost, we really want to take out those processed foods. So like Stacy was saying, that standard American diet, all of those processed foods, those grains, anything that comes in a bag or a box and has a list of 20 ingredients, half of which you can't pronounce, the other half you might not know what they are. That's not real food. So we want to focus on real whole food. We want to take out those added sugars, those refined sugars, high fructose corn syrup, sucrose, All of these things can cause inflammation as well as other high glycemic foods. So that's things like refined grains, crackers, white pasta, white rice, anything that really spikes your blood glucose levels. We also really want to focus on taking out inflammatory fats. So this is a huge one. The American diet has way more omega-6 fats in it than omega-3 fats. And so basically, we want the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 to be somewhere between 1 to 2 to 1 to 4 omega-3 to omega-6. And right now, it's pretty much like 1 to 20, that kind of ratio. So we have way more omega-6 fats in there than we do omega-3 fats. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are and how you can balance that out in a minute. But we also want to focus on avoiding trans fats, fried foods, vegetable oils like peanut oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil. All of these are really high in those omega-6 fats. We also want to focus on the quality of our proteins. So getting foods from factory farmed animals is way more inflammatory than foods that are from animal products that are grass-fed, grass-finished. The nutritional profile is so different. And so those grass-fed, grass-finished organic products are going to have a way better ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 and a better ratio of saturated fats as well. The other thing which Stacy mentioned, environmental toxins. So this is a huge one, and people don't really think about this a lot, but we are exposed to so many toxins every single day, and daily is just increasing. So avoiding those when we can, everything from, non-stick pans that you cook with to BPA and canned goods to smelling gas at the gas station, to beauty products, like the list is seriously endless. So the more that we can avoid those, the less work our immune system has to do and our detoxification systems have to do to get those out. So it'll help create a more balanced immune system and help us be ready for when we inevitably do come across, toxins and viruses and bacteria, because we don't live in a bubble, right? We are going to be exposed to these things. So that's why we really want to focus on modulating our immune system so that it's ready to attack in the way it should, increase its inflammation, decrease when necessary. And then we also, like you mentioned as well, we really want to avoid those foods that we're sensitive to. So this is a very individual thing. Certain people are sensitive to dairy, others gluten, others corn, soy. It really depends on your situation. And again, that's where working with a professional can really help you identify. But if you're eating these foods that are causing an ongoing inflammatory response in your body, it's going to cause chronic inflammation. So until you stop eating those, and not to say that you can't ever eat them again, you might have to do, a gut healing protocol or something else with a practitioner to really help your body heal so that, you can consume those without having that inflammatory response. But before you do that, if you keep eating these products, you're likely going to continue having inflammation from them. Another one is alcohol. People really don't want to hear this one, but alcohol does contribute to inflammation. So definitely thinking about that is helpful as well if you're trying to lower your inflammation. And then lastly, just anything that's going to alter your gut microbiome or your gut permeability. So, leaky gut is such a buzzword these days. And there are so many things that cause leaky gut. And most people don't realize this, but 70 to 80% of your immune system is actually in your gut. So gut health is crucial. And there are so many different things that can cause leaky gut, like food allergy, food hypersensitivity, a poor diet, low stomach acid, enzyme deficiency, toxins again, gluten, stress medications, dysbiosis, alcohol, so many different things. So having your gut health in check is super important. So that's kind of everything you want to avoid. I'll talk about everything you want to add in, but did you want to add anything to that, Stacy, before I go into that?
No, I mean, you did a really great job. I think that was a lot. That's a lot of information, and
it is
that how our bodies are just constantly exposed to so many different variables, not only from the standard American diet, but then also the environment, like you said, and it can feel overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I like to tell people to just start start taking baby steps, maybe hit, one area at a time, and just start checking off your list. Maybe just starting to make some diet changes first, and then start working about on your plastics and things, utensils that you use in the house, and then making sure that your air is clean, but taking, step by steps, because it can feel very overwhelming, and our bodies are built to handle many of these exposures. So it is okay if you don't do everything all at once. And I think you're about to talk about some of the things we can add back in, which will also help our bodies handle some of these inflammatory stimuli.
Yeah, such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. So important to take baby steps, especially, if this is all new to you, it can be so overwhelming. And then, decision paralysis kicks in and you're just helpless and you're like, I don't know where to start. Just take a baby step, maybe try a new one every week, or, whatever works for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's going to find a different way to do it, and that's totally fine. But, getting the knowledge is the first step. So I think just learning these things is super important just to begin. And yeah, so that's everything that you essentially are taking out or that you should limit. But I love talking about what you can add in, right? There's so much we can add in. Food is amazing. The power of food, right? That's why we named our podcast The Power of Food, because it's so powerful. So for an anti-inflammatory diet, you really want to focus on plant-based foods. Unprocessed foods, colorful fruits and vegetables are so anti-inflammatory. They're loaded with antioxidants, loaded with fiber. So like we were talking about with the gut microbiome and gut health, the gut loves fiber. I am such a big fan of fiber. Most people don't even get half the fiber they should be getting. So if you can aim for, I usually say about 30 grams of fiber per day. More is better. If you're not eating any fiber right now, take it slowly, because you don't want to up it really quickly. But yeah, most people are not getting enough fiber. Gut microbiome loves fiber. So the more fruits and vegetables you can have, the better. In particular, in terms of fruits and vegetables, deeper color. So red, blue, purple. So like blueberries, red cabbage, cherries, red bell pepper, red grapes, purple sweet potato, plums, red onion. All of these foods are not only delicious, but they're also anti-inflammatory. So they can help with that inflammatory response. Also, dark leafy greens. These are so important. Most people don't even think about these, but it's like your kale, your broccoli, your cabbage, your collards, your chard. These are all anti-inflammatory. They also really help with that detoxing. So like we talked about with all the toxins in our environment, dark green leafy veggies are excellent for helping with that. And again, they're also high in fiber, so that's going to help your gut health as well. In terms of fats, so we're wanting to avoid those inflammatory fats, but we want to bring in the healthy fats, which is crucial. So those are our omega-3 rich foods. So especially, the fatty fish, salmon, anchovies, sardines, herring, all of that is great. Pasture-raised eggs as well. Nuts and seeds, especially those high in omega-3s. So that's chia, flax, walnut nuts. All of those are great. And then olive oil. I love olive oil and olives. Olive oil contains anti-inflammatory phytonutrients called polyphenols that are, the hallmark of the Mediterranean diet, which we always hear about as being one of the healthiest diets you can follow. Also, in terms of other protein sources, grass-fed, grass-finished protein sources, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's a totally different nutritional composition when it's grass-fed. So things like grass-fed lamb, grass-fed buffalo, those contain a significant amount of omega-3s as well that you would not be finding if you were eating grain-fed meat. So it's totally different there. I also just wanted to mention, most people don't realize this, but you really want to focus on how you're cooking your meat. So when you cook things at a really high temperature and dry heat, it produces something called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs as we call them. And this can cause so much inflammation. So it's really best if you can cook things at a low heat in a moist environment. So things like boiling, poaching, stews, that kind of thing are great. steaming, all of that versus like grilling or, broiling, all of that. But again, we all love a good barbecue. We all love grilling food and eating foods that we like and how we like to cook them. So there are things that you can actually do to help mitigate the ages that are produced. So those are things like herbs. So for instance, rosemary, and then also marinating in an acidic compound. So like lemon juice or like balsamic vinaigrette is great. So if you do a marinade in one of those things, put a ton of herbs and spices in there, that can help mitigate the ages that are formed. And then secondly, if you eat those meats alongside vegetables, particularly green vegetables, avocado, lettuce, whatever it is, that can also help mitigate the damage that would be occurring. So there are things you can do. And speaking of spices, right, I always call spices nature's medicine cabinet. They are so beneficial for so many reasons. And it's one of the easiest, tastiest things you can do. So adding in things like turmeric, ginger, garlic, rosemary, cayenne, cloves, cinnamon, all of these spices have anti-inflammatory properties. So use them in your cooking, especially if you're cooking at high temperatures, to help mitigate those ages and that inflammation. And then lastly, just focusing on gut health. So like I said, 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. So focus on fiber, focus on prebiotic and probiotic foods, which prebiotic foods are foods like fiber that helps feed the specific bacteria in your gut. And then probiotic foods are foods that have those live microorganisms in them. So things like kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, all of that is great. And it's awesome for gut health, and then your immune system. So I know that's a lot as well, but hopefully that'll spark some ideas for people to get excited about adding these things into their diets. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Stacy, before we quickly talk about like lifestyle things you can do?
Well, I mean, I could unpack each section of that, and we can like probably have an entire
Totally.
podcast on every single topic that you brought up. So I know we're trying to keep this, not go too over time. So I won't for now, but just a couple of little points is the anti-inflammatory foods that you recommended are so awesome, not only because they are anti-inflammatory, but anything that helps move things along in the digestion helps with elimination, and that is detoxifying. So making sure that you're having regular bowel movements is a good way to know that you're eating adequate amounts of fiber. And you did mention that the 30 grams, just to put like people's, put that in perspective a little bit with food, I do try to recommend that people start to eat about 1 to 2 cups of fruits and or vegetables at each meal. And that is quite different from what we are accustomed to. If you actually look at our plates, for the most part, a big proportion of it is protein, a big proportion of it is carbohydrate, and then it's, if we're lucky, a small proportion of it is vegetable. I really want to teach people how to proportion their plate so that most of their plate, like you said, plant-based is vegetables or fruits, and that a smaller proportion would be the protein and a smaller proportion would be the carbohydrate, and hopefully that carbohydrate would be high in those prebiotics like you mentioned. So the resistant starch foods like beans, potatoes, rice, those are all prebiotic foods. So I mean, that's again repeating tons of amazing information, but we'll have many podcasts to dig into this even further. But
Definitely,
go ahead.
definitely. Yeah, inflammation in general, there's so much we could talk about. So this is like a brief overview. Like you said, we could dive in so deep to so many of these topics, which we probably will do in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much, and I love talking about it because, everyone deals with this, and it's something that we should all be focusing on, in terms of structuring our diets and adding in those healthy foods and taking out the ones that might be contributing to inflammation. So really good points. So in addition to food, there are lifestyle things that we can do. So stress is a huge contributor. So we really want to focus on decreasing stress, and that's going to look different for everyone. It might be meditating, it might be going for a walk in the woods, it might be, painting. Everyone has their own thing that they like to do that helps them decrease stress. So really focusing on that is important. Also, moderate physical activity and exercise. So I say moderate because some people go way too hard, right? They're causing chronic inflammation because they're exercising too much, too hard, too frequently, not doing appropriate exercises for their body at the right time. Other people aren't doing enough. So we want to find that fine balance between the two. And that also helps with the inflammatory response. Other things like cold immersion therapy and sauna are both really great things as well. Sleep, deep, uninterrupted sleep, potentially the most important thing. You're not going to live a healthy life unless you're getting adequate sleep, and sleep affects everything. So not just your inflammatory response, but also the foods you're choosing, your cravings, all of that, it goes back to sleep. And then, lastly, just social connection and belonging and having purpose and doing things that bring you joy. Mindset is such a big thing, and the gut brain connection is so very real. And I think, nourishing ourselves whole picture, right? Functional medicine looks at the whole human, and that is a big part of our health. So really fostering those social connections, finding purpose in your life, all of those things are super important, just as important as food and sleep and all of that. So those are just a quick overview of some lifestyle factors. Did you want to add anything to that, Stacy?
That was a really great list. I would just say with the stress, because that's something that people are just like, well, how am I supposed to just lower it? You can't just lower, And I think it's because we can't, we absolutely can't. We can't control the things that we're always being faced with. Things happen that are out of our control. But what we can control is making an intention to put a portion of your day, whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes, where you are schedule that time period to clear your head and to unwind. And it may even entail, like I said before, having an intention to every single time before you are about to eat a meal, you may have to take a little breathing session, because your bodies either go through a system of rest and digest, or a process of fight or flight. And if you are in fight or flight, you are not going to be able to rest and digest, which are the healing, processes in our body. So breathing before you eat and putting a few minutes of every single day scheduled for stress relief. I think it has to be something that we do intentionally, because we know we're going to be faced with stress. And if we don't, do these things on purpose to relieve ourselves, I think then we'll just be overwhelmed by stress constantly. And sleep is what you were saying before. I just love it. I think, during the night is when we release anti-inflammatory components like melatonin, and that literally heals our body throughout the night. So, great list. I loved everything you said.
Yeah, and I love that you added, putting stress reduction on your list, or making it something you do before meals. I tell people, if you make a to-do list every day, put your stress reduction thing on there. I put meditate as something I have to cross off on my to-do list daily, because we're so overstimulated and there's so much going on. And before you know it, you wake up and then it's time to go to bed and you're like, what just happened? So, you really have to make time for it, and it's worth it. I promise it will help with everything. And sometimes it's really hard to get going, but then once you start doing it regularly and you feel the difference, your body will start to crave it. So It's so important. And then I'm glad you mentioned melatonin too, which is so important as an anti-inflammatory compound for people to get when they're sleeping. So so many things we can do, a lot of actionable steps to help decrease inflammation and help overall health.
Do you use a specific app on the phone for your meditations, or what is your process for meditating?
So I don't, that's actually something that I'm kind of working on, finding something that works best for me. I was trying an app for a little bit. I didn't love it. I usually honestly just set a timer for like 12 minutes and do some deep breathing and meditate. But I know, everyone's different. I've been trying to get into Yoga Nidra a little bit more, which is a really nice meditation to do before bed. It's very relaxing. You basically just lay on the ground and listen to a guided meditation. So some people love guided. Other people prefer to just kind of do deep breathing, do their own thing. I find that for me, what works best is meditating after I've done something active, because then you're not, just sitting there and you get antsy. And a lot of us are sitting all day, every day anyway. So I love doing it either if it's after like a HIIT workout or a strength training session, or even yoga, just, carving out 5 to 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. It can be super short and sweet. And then once you get in a routine, it's so much easier to like settle into it versus trying to do it occasionally or like once a week or whatever. But I mean, I wish I could say I do it every day. I don't. It's on my goals list to start doing it, but I do it as much as I can. And it's definitely something I want to start incorporating more daily. Do you meditate?
Well, so it's kind of one of those things that my whole life, I just thought it was like sort of that weird thing that I know I've never tried it. But then as I've learned, the more I learn and the more I realize how much stress just affects us, I realize how important it is. So I actually do use an app. I use Calm, CALM. Have you heard of that one?
I have. I've heard of that one, and Insight Timer was the one that I was using before. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of that, and Headspace, but Calm is the one that I use. And I actually love it. They have really short, 10 or 15 minute ones. And they have these sleep stories, because I'm also one of those people that struggles with falling to sleep at night with just like, stopping my mind from speaking all night long, like just cutting everything off. So those sleep stories, and the great thing about Calm also, and this is not an advertisement for them, one of the great things is that you can download the stories and the meditations so that you can put your phone into airplane mode while you listen to them at night. And that's another thing that I do recommend for sleep hygiene, is to try to keep your devices on airplane mode or far away from you, because you don't want that stimulus going to your head all night long. So that's one of the things I liked about Calm, is that you can download all of those and keep your phone in airplane mode.
That is such a good tip, because that's usually why I don't do that kind of thing, because I do put my phone in airplane mode and then I don't have them downloaded. So I'm definitely going to look into that. I also love that you mentioned sleep hygiene, which is so key. So again, this isn't like a sleep podcast, but just really quick, making sure your room is totally dark is a game changer. Keeping the temperature cooler is really important too. So if you have trouble falling asleep at night, try turning down the thermostat to like 68 or like 65 if you can. And then, like you said, airplane mode, no electronics an hour before bed, blue blocker glasses. There's so much you can do before bed to help facilitate sleep. So if you do have trouble sleeping, there are options if you haven't tried those. I also sometimes use a lavender oil diffuser, which I find helps as well.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think we gave enough tips for people to work on for quite a while.
I think so too. Well, it was so good to talk to you, Stacy. Just so our listeners know, Stacy and I both have our own nutrition consulting businesses, and we're both accepting new clients now. So I'll just let you guys know where to find me, and then Stacy will let you know where to find her. So my business is called Grace Functional Nutrition. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at that. Grace Functional Nutrition. And then my website is www.gracefunctionalnutrition.com.
Awesome. So again, my name is Stacy Seslowsky. My business is called Heal From Food. So you can either check out my website at www.healfromfood.com. You can email me at stacy@healfromfood.com. And you can also find me on social media at Heal From Food. So we're all set.
Well, thanks so much, Stacy. This was so great. And if you guys have any topics you want us to cover or anything like that, definitely reach out and let us know. And we're more than happy to do a podcast. And thank you so much for being here and listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.